Jake Harrison walked into the big training room at the Galactic Naval Academy. The room had walls made of crystal that showed everything clearly. More than 300 students from many different alien worlds stood around watching. Jake was much smaller than most of them. The alien students came from planets across the galaxy. Some were very tall with blue skin and long arms. Others looked like walking rocks with thick skin that could stop bullets. There were bird-like creatures with sharp claws and others that looked like giant insects with hard shells. Jake was the only human in the room. All the alien students were staring at him. Most of them did not think humans belonged at the academy. Humans had only joined the Galactic Alliance 15 years ago. That was very new compared to other species who had been in space for thousands of years. Commander Vextal stood at the front of the room. He was 7 feet tall with yellow eyes and 4 arms. His skin looked like armor made of bone. He was from a race called the Korthani. They were known for being strong fighters and not liking humans very much. "Today we will have a special test," Commander Vextal said in his deep voice. "We want to see how different species work together in combat. Some species are stronger, some are faster, some are smarter. We need to know what each species can do." Jake knew this was not really about working together. This was about showing everyone that humans were too weak to be at the academy. He had heard the other students talking. They said humans were soft and broke too easily. They said humans did not belong with real warriors. His roommate was an alien girl named Silthera. She was from a race called the Etherians. They had pale skin that seemed to glow and could talk directly into other people's minds without speaking. She had tried to talk Jake out of this fight. "Your people have not evolved for this kind of fighting," she had said with her mind voice the night before. "There is no shame in saying no. Everyone knows humans are not built for war." But Jake remembered the stories his grandfather told him. His grandfather had been a soldier on Earth during the big wars before aliens found their planet. He told Jake about ordinary people who faced enemies much bigger and stronger than them. Those people found ways to win even when everyone said they could not. Jake thought about his home planet Earth. It was still fixing itself after wars that almost destroyed all humans. When the aliens first came to Earth, most humans were living in broken cities and trying to grow food in poisoned ground. But humans worked hard and proved they deserved to join the other worlds. Now Jake was here to prove humans could be soldiers too. Commander Vextal explained the rules of the fight. "You will all enter the combat zone. The last student standing in the center circle wins. You can push, grab, and hit each other, but no weapons except energy shields. The room will copy conditions from a hostile world to make it harder." The crystal walls around them started to change. The air became thinner and harder to breathe. The gravity increased, making everyone feel heavier. A thin mist filled the air that would eat through equipment if students were not careful. Jake felt his environmental suit working harder to keep him safe. As soon as the test area was ready, Jake saw 3 big alien students walking toward him. They had clearly planned to work together to beat him quickly. The first one was named Thrakmar. He was from the rock-like Gorvani people. His fists were bigger than Jake's head and looked like they were made of stone. Behind him came Kixara. She was from a race called Zephyrians, who were known for being incredibly fast and smart. Her body was thin and covered in smooth scales. She moved like a hunting cat, quick and deadly. The third alien was Gorthvin from the Bruthan race. He was even bigger than Thrakmar but moved more carefully. His people were known for being patient and planning their attacks well. The other students pressed against the walls to watch. Jake could hear them making excited sounds in their alien languages. Many had bet money on how fast he would lose. Some were taking bets on whether he would last even 10 seconds. "This should be over quickly," said one student in broken English. "Humans are too fragile," said another. "Their bones break like twigs." "I heard they do not even have natural weapons like claws or armor," laughed a third. Jake stood in the center of the fighting circle and did not move. He could feel his heart beating fast. His hands felt sweaty inside his gloves. But he remembered what his grandfather always said. "When you are scared, that just means something important is happening. Use that fear to make you stronger." The 3 aliens spread out around him. Thrakmar cracked his stone knuckles, making sounds like breaking rocks. Kixara moved in a circle around Jake, her quick feet barely making sound on the floor. Gorthavan positioned himself to block any escape route. Commander Vextal raised his upper right arm. "Combat begins in 10 seconds, his voice echoed through the room. All the watching students became quiet. This was the moment they had been waiting for. The weak human was about to learn why his kind did not belong at the academy. 5 seconds, Commander Vextal announced. Jake still did not move from his spot in the center. The 3 aliens began to move closer, confident that this would be easy. They had size, strength, and natural weapons. The human had nothing but soft skin and weak bones. Throckmar stepped forward first. His massive weight made the floor vibrate with each step. His stone-covered fist began to glow with energy from his shield device. One hit from that fist would break human bones like glass. Kixara moved to attack from the side. Her species could think faster than almost any other race. She could see 17 different ways to attack and choose the best one in less than a second. Her clawed hands prepared to strike. Gorthvan came from behind, moving slowly but steadily. His people never rushed into fights. They waited for the perfect moment and then used overwhelming force to end things quickly. "Time," Commander Vextal called out. The fight began. Jake Harrison did not step back. This surprised everyone watching. Most students expected him to try to run or dodge, but Jake planted his feet and waited for them to come to him. His grandfather had taught him that sometimes the best defense was to make your enemies come to you. What happened next would be talked about at the academy for many years. Throckmar reached Jake first. His huge fist came down like a hammer, fast enough to crush a normal person. But Jake did something unexpected. Instead of moving away from the punch, he stepped toward it. Jake grabbed Throckmar's arm as it came down. Humans had learned to hunt on a world full of dangerous animals by being smarter, not stronger. Jake used Throckmar's own weight and speed against him. He twisted and pulled, using moves his grandfather had taught him from the old Earth Wars. The massive Gorvani student found himself flying through the air. His own strength had been turned into a weapon against him. He crashed into the crystal wall with a sound like thunder. Cracks appeared in the strong material. The watching students gasped in shock. No one had expected the small human to throw around someone 3 times his size. But the fight was not over. Kixara attacked next, moving faster than most eyes could follow. Her multiple brains calculated the perfect attack pattern. She should have been able to hit Jake before he could even see her coming. She never got the chance. Jake's eyes had tracked her movement from the moment she started to attack. Humans had survived on Earth by learning to read the behavior of predators. Jake could see the tiny signs that showed where she would strike before she knew it herself. He was already moving when she committed to her attack. His counter-move was simple but perfect. He redirected her speed and sent her tumbling across the floor in a tangle of arms and legs. Gorthvan, seeing his companions defeated, changed his approach. He came in low and careful, trying to grab Jake and use his superior size to win through wrestling. Jake was ready for him too. The human cadet had studied the weaknesses of every alien species at the academy. He knew exactly where to hit to make the biggest impact. His strike was precise and devastating. 8 seconds after the fight began, Jake Harrison stood alone in the center circle. Around him, 3 of the academy's strongest students were on the ground, gasping and trying to figure out what had happened. The crowd of watching students stood in shocked silence for several heartbeats. Then the silence exploded into chaos, as hundreds of alien voices began shrieking in their native languages. The medical center at the Galactic Naval Academy was busier than it had ever been. Dr. Hilvan moved between 3 beds with his 6 arms, working on different medical tools at the same time. He was from a race called the Madari, who were born to be doctors and healers. Throckmar lay on the first bed. The big Gorvani student had a cracked shell on his back and his head was spinning from hitting the wall so hard. His rock-like skin, which was supposed to protect him from almost anything, had deep cracks running through it. On the second bed, Kixara was making small whimpering sounds. Her fast-thinking brain was confused and could not process information correctly. The Zephyrian student kept trying to stand up, but would fall back down because her balance was broken. Gorthavan was on the third bed, breathing with difficulty. The big Bruthan had damage to his air passages and could not get enough oxygen. His thick chest rose and fell in painful gasps. All 3 students would get better, but they would need to stay in the medical center for at least a week. Commander Vextal stood outside the medical center with Admiral Zarthun. The Admiral was from the Etherian race like Silthera, but much older and more powerful. Her skin glowed with a soft light and her mind voice could reach across great distances. "What about the human?" Admiral Zarthun asked. Dr. Hilvan looked at his readings. Jake Harrison has a fast heartbeat and high energy levels like someone who just ran a long distance. He asked if he could go back to his regular classes after resting for a few minutes. The 2 officers looked at each other with concern. Jake had not just beaten 3 opponents. He had beaten them so completely that they were badly hurt while he was barely tired. In another part of the academy, computer systems were studying the video of the fight over and over again. The machines that usually helped plan battles could not understand what they had seen. Human fighting methods were still new to them. Jake sat in his room trying to understand what had happened. His bed was made of soft materials that could change, shaped to fit human needs. Across the room, Silthera sat on her sleeping platform that looked like it was made of crystal. "The other students are afraid of you now," she said with her mind voice. Her usual calm was broken, and Jake could feel her worry. "They are calling you names in their languages that mean things like Deathbringer and Killer." Jake looked up from the book he was reading about military tactics. "I did not want to hurt anyone. I just did not want to give up." "That is what scares them," Silthera replied. "Most alien races stopped being violent a long time ago. When we fight, it is like a game with rules. What you did looked like real war." Before Jake could answer, someone knocked on their door. He opened it to find Lieutenant Commander Hayes standing there. She was one of only 3 humans who worked at the academy. Her face showed no emotion, but Jake could see she was tense. "Cadet Harrison, Admiral Zarthun wants to see you right now," she said. Walking through the academy halls was different now. Usually the corridors were full of students from different worlds talking and laughing together. Now groups of alien students became quiet when Jake walked by. Their many different types of eyes followed him with looks of fear and wonder. Some students pressed themselves against the walls to let him pass. Others whispered to each other in their alien languages. Jake heard words he recognized from his language studies. Many of them meant dangerous or deadly. A group of young Etherian students saw him coming and quickly moved into a side hallway. 2 Gorvani students who were usually friendly now watched him like he was a wild animal that might attack at any moment. Jake felt terrible. He had come to the academy to prove that humans could work well with other species. Instead, he had made everyone afraid of his people. Admiral Zarthun's office was designed to be comfortable for many different types of alien bodies. The Admiral herself seemed to float behind her desk, which was shaped like a half circle and appeared to hover in the air. "Cadet Harrison," she began, speaking out loud as well as using her mind voice so everything would be recorded. "What you did today has made my officers ask serious questions about having humans in Alliance military forces." Jake stood at attention and waited. He expected to be kicked out of the academy and sent back to Earth in disgrace. "Some of my commanders think humans are too dangerous to serve in our military," the Admiral continued. "They say your people are too violent for the kind of civilized warfare the Alliance practices." The words hit Jake like a physical blow. All his dreams of serving among the stars, all his hopes of making his grandfather proud, seemed to be crashing down around him. "However," Admiral Zarthun said, and her mind voice changed to something that might have been approval, "other officers think what we saw today shows exactly why humans should be here." Jake was confused. How could beating up 3 students be a good thing? The Admiral touched a control on her desk and the air in the middle of the room filled with images of stars and planets. Jake recognized some of them from his classes on Galactic Geography. "Tell me what you know about the Void Stalkers," Admiral Zarthun said. Jake felt his blood turn cold. Every student had heard scary stories about the Void Stalkers, but no one knew if they were real or just rumors. They were supposed to be aliens from the edge of the galaxy who attacked without warning and never tried to talk or make peace. Only, what is in the basic information files, Admiral? They are supposed to be a species that does not want to communicate with the Alliance. That is putting it very mildly, the Admiral replied, and her mind voice carried feelings of sadness and anger. 3 months ago, they destroyed our listening post at Kepler Station. 2 months ago, they killed every person living on the colony world of New Thessia. Last month, they attacked and destroyed an entire Alliance patrol fleet. The star images changed to show video of battles that made Jake feel sick. Ships that looked more like living monsters than machines tore through Alliance vessels like they were made of paper. The data scrolling next to the images showed that the enemy seemed to know what the Alliance ships would do before they did. But our military experts have found the main problem, Admiral Zarthun continued. The Alliance has become used to fighting wars in a civilized way. Our battle plans are based on fighting enemies who think like us and follow similar rules. Jake began to understand what she was getting at. The Void Stalkers do not fight like civilized beings, Cadet Harrison. They fight like wild predators. They find every weakness, show no mercy, and seem to think that fighting is about causing as much destruction as possible rather than achieving political goals. The display changed again to show charts comparing Alliance fighting methods with what the Void Stalkers did. The differences were frightening. What happened in the training room today was the first time we have seen how a human might fight against such an enemy, Admiral Zarthun said. Your way of fighting is more like theirs than like ours. Jake felt scared. Are you saying I am like them, Admiral? No, Cadet. I am saying you might be exactly what we need to defeat them. The Admiral stood up and walked to the big window that looked out over the Academy's training areas. Jake could see other students doing their regular exercises, moving in the careful, controlled ways their species had developed over thousands of years. Every species in the Alliance evolved past their violent stages in different ways, she explained. The Etherians developed mind-reading and group thinking. The Gorvani found strength in working together and following honor codes. The Zephyrians chose logical thinking over emotional reactions. She turned back to look directly at Jake. Humans never completely evolved past their hunter instincts. Your species kept the ability to be creatively violent that other civilizations threw away. As primitive, today that might be our greatest advantage. Jake realized that his actions in the training room had not been seen as a problem, but as a solution to a much bigger threat. The Alliance Council is meeting an emergency session next week, Admiral Zarthun continued. They are going to authorize the creation of a new special military unit designed specifically to fight the Void Stalkers. I want you to think about volunteering for this program. Jake's mind raced. Everything he had trained for, everything his grandfather had told him about human courage and determination, had led to this moment. What would this program involve, Admiral? Training with the best warriors from across the Alliance, but using human fighting methods as the foundation. You would be teaching other species how to fight like humans, while learning to use our natural advantages together with their special abilities. The weight of responsibility felt heavy on Jake's shoulders. He thought about the 3 students. He had heard about the fear in his classmates' eyes, about the choice between being seen as too dangerous for civilized service or too valuable to ignore. I need to know something, Cadet Harrison, Admiral Zarthun said quietly. When you stood in that circle today and refused to step back, what were you thinking about? Jake thought carefully before answering. I was thinking about home, Admiral. About the people who are counting on me to prove that humans belong here. And I was thinking that sometimes, when something really matters, you do not get to choose the easy path. Admiral Zarthun's mind voice carried something that felt like approval. Jake woke up early the next morning before his alarm went off. He had barely slept thinking about Admiral Zarthun's offer to join the Special Operations Program. His small room was still dark, but he could see Silthara glowing softly on her crystal sleeping platform. You are worried, she said with her mind voice without opening her eyes. I can feel your thoughts spinning like a storm. Jake sat up in his bed. What if I make the wrong choice? What if I am not good enough for this program? Silthara opened her large, pale eyes and looked at him. Yesterday you defeated 3 of the strongest students at the Academy in 8 seconds. I do not think being good enough is your problem. Jake got dressed in his academy uniform and made his way to the dining hall for breakfast. The large room that usually buzzed with conversation from hundreds of students was strangely quiet when he entered. Groups of alien students stopped talking and watched him walk to the food dispensers. He picked up a tray and moved through the line, selecting foods that were safe for humans to eat. The academy had special meals prepared for each species, since many alien foods were poisonous to other races. When Jake looked for a place to sit, he found that most tables suddenly became full when he approached. Students who had been friendly before now avoided eye contact. Finally, he found an empty table in the corner and sat down alone. As he ate his breakfast, Jake overheard conversations in alien languages around him. He had studied several of these languages and could understand some of what was being said. "The human broke Throckmar's shell armor," whispered a Gorvani student. "No one has ever done that in practice combat." "My cousin said Kixara still cannot think straight," added a Zephyrian. "Her brain processing is all confused." "Maybe humans should not be allowed in combat training," suggested another voice. "They are too unpredictable." Jake finished his meal quickly and left the dining hall. He had an hour before he needed to report to Special Operations Command, so he decided to visit the Academy's library. The library was a massive space filled with information storage devices from dozens of worlds. Each species had different ways of keeping knowledge, from crystal matrices to bioneural networks. Jake found a quiet study booth and accessed the computer terminal. He searched for information about special operations units in the Alliance military. Most of the files were classified, but he found some basic information about elite forces from different worlds. The Etherian Shadow Guard used their telepathic abilities to coordinate perfect team attacks. The Gorvani Stonebreakers relied on their natural armor and strength to assault fortified positions. The Zephyrian Lightning Strike units moved faster than most enemies could react. But Jake noticed something interesting in all these descriptions. Every Special Forces unit used tactics that built on their species' natural advantages. None of them tried to fight in ways that went against their biology. Humans were different. They had no natural armor, no telepathic abilities, no incredible speed or strength. What they had was the ability to adapt and use their environment creatively. They could learn from other species and combine different approaches in new ways. Jake realized that this might be exactly what the Alliance needed against the Void Stalkers. At exactly Ardo 800 hours, Jake stood outside the entrance to Special Operations Command. The building was smaller than the main academy structures but looked much more serious. Armed guards from several species stood at the entrance, their weapons visible but not threatening. Lieutenant Commander Hayes was waiting for him inside. "Follow me, Cadet Harrison. The training facility is underground." They took an elevator, down several levels to a complex of training rooms, laboratories, and briefing areas that Jake had never known existed. The walls were made of reinforced materials designed to contain even the most powerful alien abilities. "Welcome to Project Fusion," Lieutenant Commander Hayes said as they walked down a long corridor. "This is where we test new approaches to military tactics and training." They entered a large briefing room where Jake saw several other students he recognized from the academy. To his surprise, Silthara was there, along with 2 Gorvani students, a Zephyrian, and representatives from 5 other species. "These are the volunteers for the 1st Experimental Special Operations Unit," Hayes explained. "Each of them has shown exceptional ability in their species' traditional combat methods." A tall figure stepped forward from the shadows. It was Colonel Drake, one of the few humans in the Alliance military command structure. His face was scarred from old battles, and his eyes had the hard look of someone who had seen real combat. "Cadets," he began in a strong voice, "you are here because yesterday's events have forced the Alliance to reconsider how we approach warfare. For the past 1,000 years, military doctrine has been based on the assumption that all civilized species fight in predictable, honorable ways." He gestured to a holographic display that showed star maps of Alliance territory. Red markers indicated recent Voidstalker attacks. "The enemy we face does not follow our rules. They do not seek to minimize casualties or achieve limited political objectives. They fight to destroy, completely and without mercy." The display changed to show combat footage from the attack on New Thessia, Jake watched in horror as Voidstalker ships tore through civilian evacuation vessels without hesitation. Traditional alliance tactics have failed against this enemy because we are trying to fight predators using methods designed for civilized opponents, Colonel Drake continued. We need to learn to think like they do. He looked directly at Jake. Yesterday, Cadet Harrison demonstrated combat instincts that more closely resemble our enemy's approach than our own. This gives us our first real insight into how to develop effective counter strategies. One of the Gorvani students, a female, named Kiridan, raised her massive hand. Are you saying we should become like the Voidstalkers? Should we abandon our principles? Colonel Drake shook his head. No. We are saying we need to combine our species' natural advantages with human tactical creativity. Humans never fully evolved past their predator instincts, but they also developed strong moral codes and the ability to work in teams. Silthera spoke up using her mind voice. How do we know this approach will work? Human combat methods seem very chaotic compared to our organized strategies. That is exactly the point, Colonel Drake replied. Chaos is harder to predict and counter than organized patterns. The Voidstalkers have learned to anticipate our standard responses. They cannot anticipate responses that do not follow logical patterns. Jake raised his hand. What would our training involve, Colonel? You will learn to fight using hybrid tactics that combine human unpredictability with each species' natural strengths, Drake explained. Silthera, your telepathic abilities could be used for instant communication during chaotic combat situations rather than just coordination. Kiridan, your natural armor and strength could be applied using human hit-and-run tactics instead of direct assaults. The idea was revolutionary. Instead of each species fighting in their traditional ways, they would learn to blend approaches in combinations that had never been tried before. The training will be intensive and dangerous, Colonel Drake warned. You will be pushed beyond the normal limits of academy instruction. Some of you may decide this is not the path you want to take. He paused and looked at each student individually. But if you succeed, you will become the foundation of a new type of military unit, designed specifically to protect Alliance worlds from an enemy that conventional forces cannot defeat. Jake thought about his grandfather's stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things when faced with impossible challenges. He thought about the fear in his classmates' eyes and the choice between being seen as too dangerous or too valuable. I volunteer, he said clearly. One by one, the other students voiced their agreement. Silthera's mind voice carried determination that Jake had never felt from her before. Kiridan's deep rumble expressed Gorvani resolve. The others added their commitment in their own languages. Colonel Drake nodded with satisfaction. Training begins immediately. You have 6 months to develop tactics that can save the Alliance from its greatest threat. As they were led to their new quarters, Jake realized that everything had changed. He was no longer just trying to prove that humans belonged at the Academy. He was helping to create an entirely new way of fighting that could determine the survival of civilized worlds across the galaxy. The human cadet who had refused to step back was about to discover what his species was truly capable of when given the chance to lead instead of follow. 3 months had passed since Jake and the other volunteers began their special training. The underground facility beneath the academy had become their new home. The training rooms were scarred from countless practice sessions where students learned to fight in ways their species had never tried before. Jake stood in the center of Training Room 7, breathing hard after another combat exercise. Around him, his teammates were also catching their breath. But they were no longer the same students who had volunteered months ago. Silthera crouched nearby, her normally peaceful Etherian features showing the focused intensity of a predator. Her telepathic abilities had evolved beyond simple communication. She could now project confusion and fear directly into an opponent's mind during combat. Kiridan, the massive Gorvani female, practiced movement patterns that would have been impossible for her people just months earlier. Instead of standing firm and absorbing attacks like traditional Gorvani warriors, she had learned to use her natural armor while moving with surprising speed and agility. The Zephyrian student Veltar had discovered that his species' multiple processing brains could calculate not just the best attack patterns, but also the most unpredictable ones. He had learned to deliberately choose suboptimal tactics that confused enemies who expected logical responses. "Time," called Instructor Martinez, one of the human military advisors who had been brought in to help with the training. "Combat analysis in 5 minutes." Jake walked over to get water from the dispenser. His body ached from the constant training, but he felt stronger and more confident than ever before. The exercises they practiced were unlike anything taught in regular academy classes. Instead of learning to fight according to established rules, they practiced breaking those rules in effective ways. Instead of focusing on their species' traditional strengths, they learned to combine abilities in unexpected combinations. "You are becoming something new," Silthera said to Jake as they walked to the analysis room. Her mind voice carried wonder and slight concern. "I can feel it in your thoughts. You are not just human anymore, and we are not just what we were before." She was right. The training had changed all of them. They thought differently, moved differently, and approached problems in ways that would have been impossible for their individual species. In the analysis room, holographic displays showed their latest combat exercise from multiple angles. Colonel Drake stood at the front with several other instructors, studying the recordings with careful attention. "This session showed significant improvement," he announced. "Team cohesion is up 40% from last month. Individual adaptation scores are exceeding our projections." The display showed moments from their practice fight against simulated Void Stalker tactics. Jake watched himself coordinate with teammates in ways that looked almost like a deadly dance. "However," Colonel Drake continued, "we have received word that your training timeline has been accelerated." The room became silent. Everyone knew what that meant. "Alliance intelligence has detected a massive Void Stalker fleet gathering at the edge of our sensor range," Drake explained. "Current projections suggest they are preparing for a major assault on one of our core worlds." New images appeared on the display showing deep space sensor readings. The enemy fleet was larger than anything they had faced before. "The Alliance Council has decided that Project Fusion will be deployed for its first real combat mission in 2 weeks, Drake said. 2 weeks. Jake felt his stomach drop. They had been training for 3 months, but the original plan called for 6 months of preparation before any real combat deployment. "Are we ready?" asked Kiradan in her deep, rumbling voice. Colonel Drake was quiet for a moment before answering. "You are as ready as we can make you in the time we have. The question is whether our new approach to combat will work against a real enemy." Over the next 2 weeks, the training intensity increased beyond anything they had experienced. They practiced combat scenarios 18 hours a day, stopping only for meals and brief rest periods. Jake learned to coordinate attacks using hand signals that could be understood by all species. Silthara mastered the ability to maintain telepathic contact with multiple team members while under severe stress. The entire unit practiced working together in ways that felt natural despite being completely new. On their final day of training, they received their assignment. The UCS Defiance, humanity's newest ship designed specifically for special operations, would carry them to intercept the Void Stalker fleet before it could reach the heavily populated world of Centauri Prime. Jake stood in his quarters packing the few personal items he was allowed to bring. His hands touched a small photo of his grandfather in his old Earth military uniform. The man who had told him stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things would never know that his grandson was about to test those lessons against the deadliest enemy the galaxy had ever faced. "Second thoughts?" Silthara asked as she entered the room. Her own packing was complete, her few Etherian meditation crystals secured in protective cases. "Every minute," Jake admitted. "What if we fail? What if everything we have learned is not enough? Then we fail together," she replied with her mind voice. "But I do not think we will fail. You showed us something in that training room months ago. You showed us that sometimes refusing to step back is the only way forward." The next morning, their unit boarded a transport shuttle that would take them to the Defiance. As they lifted off from the academy, Jake looked down at the buildings, where he had first proved that humans belonged among the stars. The Defiance was unlike any ship Jake had ever seen. It was smaller than traditional Alliance vessels, but looked more dangerous. The hull was designed for speed and stealth rather than heavy armor. The weapon systems were arranged for maximum flexibility rather than overwhelming firepower. Captain Williams, a veteran human officer, met them in the ship's briefing room. "Welcome aboard the Defiance," she said. "This ship was designed specifically for the kind of mission you have trained for." The ship's crew was as mixed as their special operations unit. Humans worked alongside aliens in positions that emphasized their individual strengths while supporting the overall mission. "We will reach the intercept point in 6 hours." Captain Williams continued. "The Void Stalker fleet consists of 12 vessels in their standard hunter formation. Traditional Alliance tactics call for a direct engagement with superior firepower." She paused and looked directly at Jake and his teammates. "You are going to show them a different approach." As the Defiance moved through hyperspace toward their destination, Jake and his unit made final preparations. They checked their equipment, reviewed their tactical plans, and tried to calm their nerves before their first real battle. "Alliance Command thinks we are crazy," Veltar observed, his multiple brains processing the tactical data at high speed. "They are sending 7 students and 1 experimental ship against an enemy fleet that destroyed an entire patrol squadron." "Maybe we are crazy," Jake replied. "But sometimes crazy is exactly what you need." The ship dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the target system. On the main display, they could see the Void Stalker fleet moving in perfect formation toward Centauri Prime. The enemy ships looked more like living creatures than machines, with hulls that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. "All stations report ready," Captain Williams announced. "Special Operations Unit Alpha, you are cleared for deployment." Jake looked around at his teammates, these aliens who had become closer than family over months of intense training. They, too, were about to test everything they had learned against an enemy that had never been defeated. "Remember what we practiced," he told them. "We do not fight like them, and we do not fight like traditional Alliance forces. We fight like ourselves." The Defiance began its approach toward the enemy fleet. In a few minutes they would discover whether the human cadet who had refused to step back could lead a revolution in how civilized species defended themselves against the darkness between the stars. The Void Stalker fleet hung in space like a pack of hunting predators. Their ships moved in perfect formation, black hulls shifting and flowing as if they were alive. Jake watched them through the Defiance's viewing screen and felt the same chill he had experienced months ago when Admiral Zarthun first told him about this enemy. 12 vessels confirmed," reported Lieutenant Chen from the tactical station. "They are moving directly toward Centauri Prime. At current speed, they will reach the planet in 4 hours." Captain Williams stood beside Jake and his special operations team on the ship's bridge. The mixed crew of humans and aliens worked at their stations with quiet efficiency, but Jake could feel the tension in the air. Traditional Alliance doctrine would call for us to request reinforcements and engage in a direct fleet battle, Captain Williams said. "But we do not have time for reinforcements, and direct engagement has failed against these enemies before." Jake studied the enemy formation on the tactical display. The Void Stalkers moved like a hunting pack, with larger ships in the center and smaller, faster vessels on the edges. It was a formation designed to overwhelm opponents through coordinated attacks from multiple directions. "They expect us to attack their strongest ships first," Jake observed. "That is what Alliance forces always do." Silthera stepped forward, her glowing skin dim with concentration. "I can sense something from their ships. Not thoughts exactly, but patterns of aggression. They are confident. They believe this will be another easy victory." Kiradan flexed her massive hands, stone-like knuckles cracking with anticipation. "How do we fight 12 ships with one?" "We do not fight 12 ships," Jake said, an idea forming in his mind. "We make them fight each other." The plan that emerged from their discussion would have been impossible for traditional Alliance forces to execute. It required the kind of unpredictable, adaptive thinking that only their hybrid training had made possible. "Void Stalkers are predators," Jake explained to Captain Williams. "They hunt in packs, but all pack hunters have one weakness. They rely on coordination and hierarchy. If you can disrupt that, the pack becomes confused and turns on itself." Phase 1 of their attack began 15 minutes later. The Defiance approached the Voidstalker fleet using a flight pattern that looked like a damaged ship trying to escape. The enemy took the bait immediately. 3 of the smaller Voidstalker vessels broke formation to pursue what they thought was easy prey. As they moved away from the main fleet, Silthara used her enhanced telepathic abilities to project fear and confusion into the alien minds controlling those ships. The effect was immediate and devastating. The pursuing ships began firing on each other, their coordination destroyed by the psychological attack. Within minutes, 2 of the 3 vessels were disabled, and the 3rd was fleeing back toward the main fleet. Phase 1 complete, Captain, Williams announced. Enemy fleet cohesion reduced by 20%. But the Voidstalkers learned quickly. The remaining 9 ships tightened their formation and began advancing more cautiously. They had realized they were facing something different from previous Alliance opponents. Phase 2, Jake said. The Defiance suddenly accelerated directly, toward the center of the enemy formation. It looked like a suicide run, exactly the kind of desperate tactic that civilized species might attempt when facing impossible odds. The Voidstalkers concentrated their fire on the approaching human ship, confident that they could destroy it before it reached them. But Veltar's multiple brains had calculated the timing perfectly. At the last possible moment, the Defiance used its advanced maneuvering systems to slip between 2 of the larger enemy vessels. Kiradan and the other close combat specialists launched themselves from the ship in specially designed boarding pods. Their mission was not to capture enemy vessels, but to cause maximum chaos in minimum time. The Gorvani warrior smashed through the hull of the nearest Voidstalker ship like a living projectile. Her natural armor protected her from the hostile environment inside the alien vessel, while her human-trained combat skills allowed her to cause devastating damage to critical systems. On 2 other ships, the rest of Jake's team executed similar attacks. They fought not to win control of the vessels, but to disable key systems and create fear among crews that had never faced boarding actions before. The psychological effect was greater than the physical damage. The Voidstalkers had always been the hunters, never the hunted. Having enemies appear inside their own ships violated every assumption they had about how space combat worked. Enemy fleet coordination collapsing, Lieutenant Chen reported. 3 ships have stopped advancing. 2 others are firing randomly. But the mission was far from over. The largest Voidstalker vessel, a massive Predator ship that served as the fleet commander, had identified the Defiance as the primary threat. It began a direct pursuit, its weapons charging for a killing shot. Jake, Captain Williams said urgently, we need Phase 3 now. Jake nodded and opened a communication channel to his team members still aboard the enemy ships. All units, execute final protocol. What happened next had never been attempted in the history of space warfare. Instead of trying to escape from the ships they had boarded, Jake's team members began overloading the enemy vessel's power systems in a carefully coordinated sequence. The first ship exploded just as the Voidstalker commander fired its main weapon. The blast created a chain reaction that disrupted the energy beam and damaged 2 nearby vessels. The second explosion came 3 seconds later, creating debris that impacted another enemy ship. One by one, the Voidstalker fleet was destroyed, not by superior firepower, but by their own weapons and systems turned against them through human tactical creativity, combined with alien abilities. The entire battle lasted 18 minutes. When it was over, 12 Voidstalker vessels had been reduced to debris and scattered survivors. The Defiance had taken minor damage but remained fully operational. All team members report successful extraction, Silthara announced, her telepathic abilities confirming that everyone had made it back to their recovery shuttles safely. As the Defiance turned away from the battle site, Jake looked at the destruction they had caused and felt a mixture of pride and sadness. They had won a victory that would save millions of lives on Centauri Prime, but the cost had been enormous. Captain Williams received a priority communication from Alliance Command. Congratulations, Defiance. This is Admiral Zarthun. What you accomplished today has changed everything. The Admiral's telepathic voice carried across the communication channel to reach Jake directly. The Alliance Council has authorized immediate expansion of the Special Operations Program. We need 50 more units like yours, and we need them trained within 6 months. Jake realized that their victory was just the beginning. The galaxy would need many more teams like theirs to face the threats that existed beyond the borders of civilized space. 3 months later, Jake stood in a new training facility on the Academy world, watching fresh volunteers from dozens of species learn the hybrid combat techniques his team had developed. He wore the uniform of a commander now, his promotion earned through the battle that had saved Centauri Prime. Silthera worked beside him as an instructor, teaching telepathic combat applications to students who had never imagined such things were possible. Kiradan led physical training sessions that combined Gorvani strength with human tactical flexibility. The Academy had changed too. Instead of keeping species separated by their traditional abilities, the new curriculum encouraged students to learn from each other and develop unprecedented combinations of skills. Your grandfather would be proud, Silthera said as they watched a group of mixed-species cadets practice coordinated attacks. Jake nodded, thinking about the stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things when faced with impossible challenges. The human cadet who had refused to step back had become something more, the founder of a new kind of warrior that would protect the Alliance through determination, creativity, and the willingness to fight for what mattered most. In the depths of space, other threats were already taking notice of the species that would not yield, preparing for conflicts that would test everything Jake and his allies had learned. But for now, the galaxy was safer because one human had chosen to stand his ground when it mattered most.